Hello, everyone. Hi. We're going to get started with the presentation tonight. We're really very excited to have David Orr here to talk to you tonight. I want to read you just a little bit about David, and then I want to tell you a couple of personal things. Not too personal. But David Orr is the Paul Sears Distinguished Professor of Environmental Studies and Politics, Emeritus at Oberlin College. He was telling me he's flunked retirement twice because he also was a professor of practice at Arizona State University. I guess he's retired from that now as well. He is the author of 8 books, including Dangerous Years, Climate Change, The Long Emergency, and The Way Forward. And he's a co-editor or editor of 5 others, including Democracy in a Hotter Time. He's been awarded 9 honorary degrees and a dozen other awards, including the Lyndhurst Prize, a National Achievement Award from the National Wildlife Federation, a Visionary Leadership Award from Second Nature, a National Leadership Award from the U.S. Green Building Council, a Lifetime Achievement Award from the North American Association for Environmental Education, 2018 Leadership Award from the American Renewable Energy Institute, and a Lifetime Achievement Award from Green Energy Ohio and the John D. Cobb Common Good Award. I've known David for a long time. I don't remember how many years it is now, but I do remember before we started on our Center for Sustainable Landscapes, actually, even before that, I remember going out because we heard about this great building that was built at Oberlin College. It was a zero energy building, had a living machine. So we took the whole design team out there to go look at it. Saw the great building that David was responsible for, way ahead of his time, building a building like that in 2000. Okay, that's way ahead of everybody else before climate change or anything was being discussed. David was way ahead of the curve there. Amazing to see that building. David's been here a number of times, brings students here, come see our building, so it's been a really great partnership, and it's just really exciting. He's a fantastic speaker, and we're really excited we're able to get him to come here tonight. So, David, without any more, thanks so much for coming, and thanks for being a part of our symposium.
Don't stop eating on my account. It's really nice to be here, and Richard has hosted my classes in ecological design. You come here, and this is kind of a go-to place for students, and they always left very inspired. So, Richard, thank you for your role in this movement and taking this further. Yeah. I've got a 4-hour talk, and why are you laughing? I want to start with a true story, and you'll understand this in just a moment. I was at a restaurant in Seattle, and early in the morning, I was on East Coast time, and that was on West Coast time, and the waiter is a guy that looks like Jack Nicholson and acted a little bit like Nicholson. I happened to be sitting there reading a book by a theologian, Walter Brueggemann, called Prophetic Transformation. And that was my morning reading. And there was a reason for that because we were doing a conference on theology and climate in Atlanta the next week. And so I was sitting there boning up on this. And this waiter comes up to me and says, "Do you want water?" I said, "Yeah, but I tell you, put the H2 in one glass and the O in another." He didn't bat an eye. He walked away, and I thought, gee, I blew that one. So he walked away, comes back with one glass, and points to my book, Prophetic Transformation, and said, "Use your prophetic transformation and separate it yourself." So I did. It was hard. Listen, I'm going to do, with PowerPoint, you're supposed to have a lot of pictures and almost no reading material. I'm going to violate all the rules of PowerPoint. And there's a reason for this, and it gets back to this prophetic transformation. We are the design community. All of us are in this role of having to rethink a future. And the present isn't working out quite the way we thought it might. And you can start talks and you can go through all the curves going up like this or down like that, and it's a point of disaster, and then people just leave in despair. I don't want to do that with you. So I'm going to make an assumption, and this is not a prediction. It's just a kind of thought exercise that we made it. And so that's the theme of the talk. Before I get into that, let me make some other comments. Climate change is a symptom. It isn't a thing itself. It's a symptom of lots of other things that have gone wrong. We deal with it mostly, I think, in this society, in writings and talks and so forth, as if it is just kind of an isolated thing. It isn't. It is the net result of lots of other things going wrong. We also live at a time when climate change and imploding democratic institutions are in collision. And you can't solve one, and this is an assumption I'm going to make, and I think there's good reason for it. You can't solve one without solving the other. Years ago, we're in a different life. I worked for Jimmy Carter and his transition team. And he came into the office one day in September of 1976. He was up 6 or 8 points at that time over Gerald Ford. So he assumed he was going to win. And I happened to know him from before, and he came over to my desk and said, I want you to write a paper on the most important environmental issue my administration is going to face. And I said, well, Governor, I can't do that, but I can bring people together to do it. And so we assembled a bunch of famous people at the time, Amory Lovins and Eugene Odom, the ecologist, came together and we wrote something called the Wolf Creek Statement. And it was about the most important issues his administration would face, having to do with energy and climate and so forth. That was 1976. And that paper still reads well. And that's no credit to us. That is a discredit to us as a society. We knew enough to do a whole lot better than we've done on that issue. The first warning to a U.S. president was given to Lyndon Johnson by the National Academy of Sciences in 1965. We've known, and if you go back into the history of Exxon and so forth, ExxonMobil and oil companies knew from their own scientists that burning their product would change the climate of the planet and would kill people. The best science being done on climate change was done by ExxonMobil and oil companies back in the day. Now, in thinking about this, 2 other comments. Being Americans, we think we have problems, and the way you solve problems is with better gadgetry. And I'm for gadgetry. All of us in this room are using gadgets, solar collectors and wind machines and all kinds of stuff. So we're into that. And that is a necessary but not sufficient condition to get through this crisis that we're in. It's going to have to be a people solution. And so the most exciting things happening, I think now, are happening at the local level. And I'm hearing it from several of you here before dinner. It's things where people are coming together as people to do exciting kinds of things. That's where the action is going to be. I wish it was at the federal level as well. But that's been cut off, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, 2 other comments. The question for us is, what do we do? Now, your organizations vary, and most of you have facilities and do public programs around nature and plants and so forth. And how do we do that in a way that responds to the crisis? You could turn the question around to me. I spent most of all my adult life in and around colleges and universities and educational organizations. And you can say the same thing. It's a very appropriate kind of thing to ask. What are you doing now? Because we're not blameless. We in education are not blameless in this. We've looked at this issue and kind of walked away from it. Oh, that's somebody else's problem. We had no department at most any college or university able to integrate issues into coherent courses and programs, and also begin to adjust endowments and expect all this green stuff. We knew this a long time ago. We should have been into it a long time ago. Now, finally, let me say this. If I was asked to summarize the issues that are before us, this is a battle over truth. Boil it down to its essence. This is a fight of truth versus lies. Now, I don't have the truth, but the truth is a process we use in science to finally get at a clearer and more accurate view of how things actually work in the biophysical world. It ought to be the same in the philosophical world and political world as well. We're in a fight for our lives over lies and mistruth. And it's not that anybody knows what the truth is, but we had a process, mostly in the learned world, in your world and mine, where we struggle to understand the world we live in. It isn't easy, and there's no such thing as anybody having all the truth, but it's a process we proceed with in respect for each other, with each other's dignity, with peer review, with commentary, with dialogue. Democracy is like that. And so when I get into democracy, democracy is a process. And I'll explain that in just a moment. But let me mention two lies I think that are particularly important, and then I'll get down to work here. One of those is that humans can control nature. That is something I think most all of us would agree we can't do that. We can learn to accommodate nature. We can learn to do lots of things with nature, natural processes. But Bacon's idea way back when, remember Francis Bacon? Way back when, that we would control nature. And we would squeeze or put nature on the rack and squeeze her secrets out of her, or torture her secrets out of her. That was one view of nature. It's a lie. We cannot do that. Not only we can't do it, we shouldn't try to do it. And the other lie is this, and it comes up in the press, and this is not what my talk is quite about, but it's that we are, as humans, mean, violent, self-seeking, nasty people. I don't think that's true. I think the evidence is we're actually, take away some of the constraints on us and pressures, we're actually pretty nice creatures. We have that capability, at least, at a minimum. And the argument we can't live together, Marina Menachal wrote a book on how Arabs and Muslims and Christians live together in harmony for years in a city in Spain. We can do these things. We're better than we're told we are. So somewhere, there's a lie that's crept into our dialogue about ourselves. All right, having said that, that's not my talk. so here comes the picture part. All right, 3 flags. Or 2 flags. We're getting ready to celebrate our 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, 1776. And it is the founding document. Abraham Lincoln made it kind of the centerpiece of what made America great. Not the Constitution, but the Declaration of Independence. This idea that all men are created equal. And if there was ever a pregnant thought, that was it. Because it wasn't too long before, no pun intended in that, where women said, well, ain't I a person? Shouldn't I be equal? And then Native Americans and African Americans and so forth. That thought has swept the world. And so that was the world in 1770, or we set in motion in 1776. The flag today, at its best, and I'll cover this, I don't know what your politics are, and frankly, I don't care. But the flag is tattered. We're in trouble. And there is a constitution being shredded almost daily. I don't want to get locked away in that. Now, the year 2276, 250 years in the future, 500 years span of time. What will that be? So I want to make an assumption that we made it. Okay? And by making it, this isn't nirvana. This is simply kind of hard numbers. If you had a control panel like you have on a plane, your instrument panel would have all this stuff on it. So I'm going to make an assumption that we brought carbon dioxide emissions and heat-trapping gas emissions back down from historic high. Right now, they're CO2 levels are at 430 or so, give or take. We brought it back down to something around 350. Population, we've gone from 8.2 or 3 billion people to 4. Nuclear weapons, we abolished them. Natural systems are recovering. Biodiversity is stabilized. Democracy is flourishing. Poverty is eliminated. Artificial intelligence is controlled. Okay? Now, you can add lots of other things. But that is my vision. 250 years. We made it. Now, the question for me and for you, or all of us, is how did we do it? Remember that movie, What'd You Do During the War, Daddy? This is the question future generations are going to be asking us. What did you do when it all was up for grabs? Now, some of you may say, well, gee, that's too partisan. It's not partisan at all. This is not left versus right, liberal versus conservative. This is about the rules of the game. So imagine football being played with no referees, no rules, and teams show up with Uzis and hand grenades. That's not football. That's war. And the same true in our politics. Democracy is about conversation. And conversation requires that we're nice to each other. We don't like each other. You don't have to like people. But you respect them. And you respect the dignity and their right to say what they want to say without persecution. Democracy is about how you keep that conversation going. That's what's at stake now. And in a lot of ways, it's the least probable way to do anything democratically. But it's the only way, and I'll make this argument as we go through the talk, it's the only way we can govern effectively on a planet with a biosphere. Second point. Well, we just are nature preserved. We don't do politics. You can't not do politics. If you say we don't do politics, you're doing politics, just the politics of the status quo. Now, the question for you, you're saying, well, that gets us in a heap of trouble. Well, it could. But how you do it, the way you frame things, the demonstrations you put up, and this fundamental idea that somehow we are citizens of both a political system and an ecological system. We are inevitably dual citizens, and we've forgotten the one and put our faith and hope in the other. Do you follow what I'm saying? You can't not be political. You can try, you can pretend, but inevitably we are all going to be political. Now, next part of the talk is this. Let's look hard at where we are. Now, this is where I'm violating the cardinal rule of PowerPoint presentations. Don't put a lot of print on the screen, but I want you to read this. This happened, and I'll leave out the first. That's from Tom Edsel's column in the New York Times. A vice president, there is no law, there is just power. I don't give a shit what you call it. J.D. Vance. Donald Trump. I have the right to do anything I want to. I am president of the United States. Try that on Lincoln, or Roosevelt, or Washington, or even Jackson. Next. The executive will not necessarily snap back as soon as a new president is in office. Dismantled institutions will not magically reconstitute themselves. The habits of performance and submission will not miraculously be discarded. What do you call an emerging age of right-wing technopolitics, of institutional collapse, of retribution as government policy, of gleeful militarized nativism, of cultural retrenchment and revanchist history, of selective legalism, international abdication, furthered by a formalized system of executive impunity? I don't know how you respond to the morning news, but when I look at it, I'm flabbergasted. I never thought I would see this happen in this country. Not America. This is the United States of America. That's fascism. It doesn't happen here, but it is happening. That's simply the daily news. Stephen Miller, probably the most powerful person in office, and I would include actually even Donald Trump in that statement. Stephen Miller at Charlie Kirk's memorial service said, "We are the storm, and our enemies cannot comprehend our strength or determination, our resolve, our passion. You have nothing. You are nothing. You are wickedness. You are jealousy. You are envy. You are hatred. You are nothing. You have no idea the dragon you have awakened." Now, I don't want to dwell on that. That is you're hearing conversations from the cockpit of this aircraft we call the United States of America. That is what's being said. Not quietly, not privately, it's being broadcast aloud. Now, if you say you don't do politics, think about this. And study your history. Go back and read the history of Germany in the 1930s. This is serious stuff. They are dismantling what took years to build. Now, slight discursion. We think as a country, we're getting ready to celebrate our 250th anniversary from the Declaration of Independence. That is a pittance of time compared to most empires. The Hittite Empire, which, remember the Hittite Empire? Sometime before 1940. Lasted for hundreds of years. We are a pittance. 250 years is not long. So we should be students of what happens when civilizations collapse. So just a thought. How did patriotism get so whittled down to being a bumper sticker on a pickup truck? And how did the word conservatism end up describing anything? What is being conserved? It's a good position, but what is it we're conserving? And get down to taxation. It's the price we pay for civilization. Oliver Wendell Holmes said years ago. I mean, all the words that we use, our public language has been corrupted. Now, the point isn't just technical. This is the moral language. This is the stuff that holds us together as people. This is why we do or do not do things to each other. Our language is first of all, it is moral. It is what defines us. Here's the second thing. A systems revolution. And the slide says, and I think this is true, there aren't many accidents in the world. Most of what we see is the working out of the rules of the system. That's the game. So down below this, below the first point, design economy for maximum growth, minimum foresight, no control, and powered by fossil fuel. And you think you're not going to heat the climate? That's just the working out of the rules built into that system. So systems thinking, I'm not going to read the thing here, but you all do this in some way. This is the revolution. How do we begin to think in terms of systems and patterns? The pattern, as Gregory Basin once put it, the pattern that connects. That's our job. Devilishly hard to do. How do we see what system and what patterns? But that's our challenge. And this pits Descartes and Bacon versus you and me and systems thinkers. But we have to be systems thinkers at this point. We have to go past the particulars. This is the big issue. Systemic solutions are the ideal. We know how to do this. This is not rocket science, as they say. We know how to create systemic solutions that solve for that pattern and create no new problems. But what's on the screen is just common sense to you and me. And it is nice to be in a place like this because this building and green buildings generally are systems designed. You've looked at where the materials come from, how they're powered, how they work, and so forth. You haven't designed, you haven't optimized the parts, you've optimized the whole system. So having this conversation in Richard's building this is a natural fit. We know how to design not just buildings, but cities and farms and so forth. So these are the Phipps Centers on the left side, the Lewis Center that was at Oberlin College, Richard referred to, the hotel that followed that, 135,000 square foot hotel entirely powered by sunlight. Did not cost more, but saves more going into the future. So all those things we know about green design, that's just systems at work. And the thing that's so beautiful about the Phipps Center or green buildings, yours and anyone else's, is they educate. It's hard to take ideas of systems out there into the marketplace because they're all abstractions. They're just words we wad up and throw. But to see things in action, to see a building that works or a farm that works, next, the shift of fossil fuels, yes. And then Janine Benya's work on biomimicry. Begin to understand how nature makes things and begin to replicate that on how we make things. This, again, is not rocket science. This is old stuff. We've known how to do this for a long time. It just isn't penetrated the mainstream of the market for all kind of other reasons. And then the last slide in this sequence, Wes Jackson, longtime friend, natural systems agriculture. Nature is the best farmer around there, and that's old to all of you in this room. But how do you replicate that in everything that we do? This is a systemic systems kind of change that needs to permeate everything we do. Our relationships, our politics, and so forth. Let's keep moving. Now, there is a movement to make the executive of the United States a unitary executive. There are people that are prominent in the manosphere and elsewhere talking about the need to have kings and emperors. To hell with you. We don't care about your opinion. But we're going to have kings and emperors and so forth and so on. So we're enjoined here as systems thinkers to begin to think through this system we call governance and politics. How does that work on a planet with a biosphere? How do we render ourselves and our progeny safe for a planet with a biosphere? But we have to now make the case for democracy as if the ecosphere or the biosphere really does matter. That's not necessarily an easy case to make, although I think it's the only case that we would ever make about governance. Now, one very brief excursion into democracy. Democracy 1.0 occurred around a fireplace, tribal culture. And somebody in that tribe said, I don't agree with the decisions being made here. And the rest of the folks said, okay, that's right, that's all right. My screen just disappeared. It's come back. Miracle. Miracles happen here. So somebody says, I disagree, and the tribe said, okay, that's okay. Opinions matter. They accorded that person the right to disagree. Democracy 2.0 was Greek democracy. Perfect? No. Never perfect. That was mostly guys, citizens of Greece, meeting on Pink's Hill just below the Parthenon and rendering decisions. No women, no foreigners, no slaves. But it was 2.0. 3.0 is Tom Jefferson in Philadelphia. That's that Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. That pregnant phrase that has rippled through time and now is taken as being the core of democratic societies. Now, that system of democracy has come undone. It had flaws in it. Slavery was the first flaw. Second flaw was women, Native Americans, other people. So who defined the we in we the people? That was the core. And then it left lots of other things. There was nothing in the Constitution, and I'll get to this in a later slide, but nothing in the Constitution that protected the nature we know we depend on. Nothing, not a word about it. So democracy 4.0, I'm not going to read the slide, but we've got to invent some alternative to 3.0. It's not working. The 3.0, we heated the planet. We drove species into extinction. We fought wars. We did all of these things. Don't overlook it. 4.0 has got to do better on all of those things. Just to put this up on the slide, Václav Havel is one of the premier thinkers of the 20th century on democracy. This is from Laudato Si. Unless citizens control political power, it will not be possible to control damage to the environment. Now, just take that as an hypothesis. We need everybody engaged in this. That is not intuitively obvious because we're used to having, Xi Jinping can make decisions so quickly and he does all this stuff so quickly. Yeah, he can do that. And he can do other things very quickly. And same with Donald Trump. So authoritarian rule has a certain constituency. But Laudato Si makes the point here that we're not going to get there. We're not going to control climate change and a lot more without having a smarter citizenry engaged in these things. We can take that up later if you'd like. Constitution and law. Remember, if the founding fathers knew then, say in 1789 or 1788, what we now know about how the earth works as a physical system, all its leads and lags and surprises and so forth, how would they have written a constitution? Now, I want you to study that. That's important stuff when the majority on the Supreme Court is originalists. Well, those guys were ecologically illiterate. Most of them owned slaves. And that the originals there, no. We can do better than this. And those people thought the Constitution would be amended. Jill Lepore's recent book, A Harvard Historian, on the amendments of the Constitution. The amending process has been kind of suspended. Hadn't passed an amendment in 50 years. But think of this. How do you get ecology, your profession and mine, woven into the laws and structures of the earth, of the country? Posterity is only mentioned once in the Constitution. That's in the preamble. Otherwise, it's simply we're silent about our grandchildren and their grandchildren and the future posterity. Number 5, we need to rethink government. Now, you and I have lived through a 40-year war against governing and governance. 40 years. Some of you are too young to remember Ronald Reagan, when he stood up and ran for office in 1980. The idea was that government is the problem. And he would say that, he said that in his inaugural address. Government is a problem. Get government off our backs. Well, that's okay, but you left the corporations on our backs. And so this 40-year war against government will be no better than what we ask it to be. And if corporations and the economy are going to be, what happened in the year 2008, corporations and banks nearly collapsed the global economy. Don't tell me efficiency is all on that side. Government won't be any better than what we demand it to be. Reinhold Niebuhr's comment here, again, gets back into the theology of this. But governments do what corporations and oligarchs cannot do and will not do. And you can see that now. If it doesn't make money, they won't do it. So public libraries and the things that we do because we're compassionate and the things that we say is a right, like the right to health care and the right to so forth and so on, that's not part of the economy. But government can make that part. That government is important. And governance simply refers to the things that happen governing resources in the private market sphere. Mariana Mazzucato is one of the most brilliant economists I read. And she points out that government, there's a different way to think about government. I'm giving only one instance. She points out that federal money, your tax money and my tax money, created all of these things. The computer, the smartphone, all those technologies that went in that. That was developed with our investment dollars. Did we ever get a penny back? No, not a penny back. So we invested in things that made billions of dollars and made lots of people very, very wealthy. That was our investment, but we never got a return on it. So Mariana Mazzucato says the obvious. We should get a return on our money. So if Apple takes inventions that we pay for with our tax dollars and creates a huge amount of wealth for themselves, shouldn't they give some of that back? And the answer is absolutely yes. That's reinventing government, rethinking what governments do. But we've spent 40 years marinating in this philosophy that government's the problem. Government's the problem. And it's an old philosophy. It goes back all the way back to the anti-federalists of the days and so forth. Here's a sixth idea. Very quickly, these are graphics that come from the great economist Herman Daly. The idea of a steady state economy. And economies grow up to a certain point, and then they need to stop growing. Not necessarily stop developing, but stop growing in terms of physicality, the number of inputs. This is sheer physics, nothing more than just physics. The laws of entropy say that sooner or later what comes in this pipeline we call the economy will come out the other end as waste, gases, and so forth. That's the laws of entropy. You go from ordered matter to disordered matter. And so the idea of having an economy designed not to grow in perpetuity. Jill Lepore, the Harvard historian I mentioned a moment ago, has an interview in today's Times with Richard Lenhart, and she points out that the idea of a good society used to be a society that people could debate and it was a moral and political kind of thing. Now the good society, where the American dream is the amount of stuff that we own. Well, that has ecological implications. We own more stuff than we can control. That's why our landfills are running over. This is Herman Daly. This is the way an economist portrays this. But there comes a point where you shift from economies doing good things to doing what he calls ilth, or bad things. And that's the point where we are now. That's global warming. That's oceanic acidification. That is garbage and junk, and that's the traffic jams and so forth. If we are to get a hold of the economy, however, the agents in the economy, what Luke Kemp calls Goliath, have got to be controlled. So think of the corporations here. So a couple of comments about corporations. They were given the legal rights of persons. In this Santa Clara County decision, which is 1886, read the history of that. It was otherwise an insignificant case of taxation, unpaid taxes on railroad rights of ways, and goes to the court. The court, with a Ohio guy as the chief justice and a railroad lawyer as the secretary of the corporation, is said to have decided that corporations have the legal rights of persons protected by the Bill of Rights. Now, you and I are persons. We can be in one place at one time. Our assets are limited. We're all going to die at some point. We have values and so forth, but that's persons. Corporations are no such thing. Their assets can be unlimited. They can be global. They can live forever, and they have no conscience. And so those are persons protected the rights of freedom of speech. They can lie, and they do. And they can do all kinds of things. The next slide will develop this thought a little bit more. But the idea of power being given to corporations, then you end up here with Citizens United, the most important decision of our time, I think, which opened the gates to dark money, money that is unaccountable, into the political process. This is not a democracy. This is an oligarchy, bought and paid for with money we don't understand and has no way to control. Until we take this back, then democracy's doomed. Robert Hare was a psychologist working for the FBI years back, And he says, what's a corporation? And he compares it to a psychopath. Callous unconcern for feelings of others, incapacity to maintain enduring relationships, reckless disregard for the safety of others, deceitfulness, repeated lying, incapacity to experience guilt, failure to conform to social norms and laws. I'm going to skip over this slide. Just let that sink in. Corporations, for whatever good they do, are basically psychopaths. But they have unlimited budgets to advertise to tell us they do it all for us today. We're just doing this for you. We're making billions only for you. Number 7. I don't see a way to get to 2276 without something that looks an awful lot like that axial revolution or a spiritual change. This is how Pope Francis put it. We're at a hinge point where we either step our game up or we perish, or just descend into permanent chaos. That's not hyperbole. That's simply where we are. So whatever your religion is, this is not a matter of a particular faith group. This is a matter of our sensitivity to the unknown and to the holiness, whatever you call it, by whatever means you define it. Tom Berry put it this way. Thomas Berry, the great historian of religion. We're citizens in a community of life and trustees for all yet to live. Everything is connected. Violence is self-defeating. Whole, health, healing, holy are simply one thing. All that connectedness. I'd never thought of chainsaws as being theological instruments, but she did, obviously. But this is the time to begin to take chainsaws to our values and begin to build a very different kind of value structure. This is the New Yorker article portraying the tale of the jinn, which is an Islamic tale in which animals are in the jury and humans are in the docket, or in the dock. We're being tried. And I used to give this to my students. They had to read the tale of the jinn. And at Oberlin, most of my students thought that humanity ought to be done in anyway. They were no good and just go away. And I'd say, okay, come back next class period. Let's talk it over. By next class period, they would reconsider Mozart and Mother Teresa and all kinds of good people and good things that have happened. But what's the case we make for our right to live on this planet? The 8.3 billion of us are doing a lot of damage to it. Look at the roadkill on highways. I mean, use whatever gauge you want. By what right do we exist? Now, the point of this is this. To get to 2276, I think it'd be really good if we knew, this is taken from kind of Abraham Lincoln, if we knew why we deserve to survive, we would know better how to go about the act of surviving. You follow that? If we knew better why we were deserved to survive. This is this issue of who are we as a people? What are we? We're just merely consumers or what? I'm getting to the end of this, but let's have in that world of 2276, nobody has a right to have $1 billion. Period. Nobody. The numbers are a little bit off. They've gotten worse since this was done by Oxfam. 8 billionaires in a golf cart controlled a little over half of the wealth. It's now 4 in a golf cart controlling about 2/3 of the wealth of the planet. The numbers are getting worse almost by the minute. And so no billionaires. The best book explaining why we should be an equal society or pursue equality, I know, is Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett's The Spirit Level. If you haven't seen it or read it, it's a dynamic book and it puts a lot of numbers behind this. Unequal societies cause all kinds of issues. They have all kinds of health issues and all kinds of other things. Once you have inequality beyond a certain level, you create all kinds of other difficulties that we have to pick up as citizens in different ways. Number 9, education. Let's assume that all students that graduate from high school or college or anything else know how the Earth works as a physical system, what planet they're on. How do you get to be a Supreme Court nominee when asked about climate change and the answer comes back, oh, I don't know anything about that? How do you get to that level without understanding how Earth systems work? You can't get out of a college, whatever your major is, you have to understand what planet you're on and how it works. How about adding to that the basic principles of democracy and citizenship and the basic principles of governance? That we're indivisible, we're parts of this indivisible whole. We're citizens of a polity, but also of a biological community. And then we're kin to everything that has ever lived is living, or will by our forbearance live. And then coming down to the end of this, I worry about a younger generation that grows up looking at screens. On average, it's 9 hours a day looking at some screen. There's some pushback now I read or hear and see. But 9 hours a day watching a screen. The world then is abstract. The world becomes just something out there, but the real world is on that screen. And that screen, social media, have done us a lot of mischief. So how, if we snap that thread, as E.O. Wilson warned, what happens to us? Einstein said we would simply go insane. I think Wilson would have agreed with that. Now, finally, this is John Lewis, the great Georgia congressman. And John Lewis was as close to a saint as anybody in Congress. Fractured skull in Selma on the Pettus Bridge. Never gave up, never an unkind word, just kept moving at the goal of equality and justice and fairness. And we have got to learn to be less adept as consumers and better citizens. That's John Lewis in the foreground there, getting his head whacked. So year 2276, we made it. We did all of those things. And we changed the way the world works, we changed the prospect. That's not a prediction. That's simply saying we could make it. Is that enough? No. And I want to add 4 other slides here. Ann Wisson-Spurn, who's one of the giants of landscape architecture, puts it this way. Now is the time for telling new tales, for retelling old dilemmas, how to live in the world and preserve it, how to sustain tradition and foster invention, how to promote freedom and cultivate order, how to forge identity and value difference, how to appreciate the parts and grasp the whole. That's a different story. That's a different narrative. We, you, all of us, have to begin to put together different stories about how these fit. Are they going to be complicated stories? You bet they are. But simple in essence. This is a different kind of narrative. And I think I cannot imagine a group better assembled to begin to tell parts of that story. The natural history, the human role in the natural world, part of that story. Is how you build, what you do in your various activities, how you demonstrate, how you organize events in your places. That's the story we have to tell. Non-puny ideas, back to William Barber's slide about our ideas are too puny for our circumstance. Most of these ideas are old ideas. They're about justice and decency and fairness and compassion, democracy, mercy, foresight, stewardship, and so forth. Those are old ideas. Complicated in the delivery, but very simple in the saying of it. That's part of that narrative. And most of this, one of my favorite books, Robert Fulghum's book. You learn it in kindergarten. Play fair, clean up your messes, share your cookies, don't take things that aren't yours, hold hands crossing the street. Isn't that good? That is the simple element of this. That is humanity come alive, growing to a different stature. 2 last thoughts. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is from Amish country in Holmes County, Ohio. Now, what are those kids seeing? Well, they're seeing something, adults, hundreds of adults down there, if you begin to count them down in the barn. Skilled adults, cooperating, collaborating. Young kids, women, men, everybody doing their part in a barn raising. And by the end of the day, most Amish barns will have hay in them also if the weather permits. So you not only get a building, but here these kids are. What is going on in the minds? That is what we don't often see. The idea we come together and we do collaborative things. And then the last thought I have is this. Jane Goodall. We pray for these things with humility. We pray because the hope that is within us and because of a faith in the ultimate triumph of the human spirit. We pray because of our love for creation and because of our trust in God. We pray above all for peace throughout the world. That's the message. And coming together as human beings. There's no technology that's going to save us, although technology is a good thing, we all depend on. But it's going to be a revolution in how we relate to each other. That's what we're all about. Can we make it to 2276? I think so. Is it going to be easy? No. But we can do it. We can do it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, David. That was a really incredible presentation, like they all are. It was really amazing. And a really good challenge for all of us. I think we all share your vision of 2276. Do we?
Yeah.
Do we think we're going to get there?
Anybody done, sir?
Great challenge for all of us, and I think a great opportunity to really capitalize on the role we play in each of our communities and the respect and the way people look at us in our communities. This is a great opportunity for us to be part of that solution. So thank you for being here, David. Thank you for calling us to our attention, and thanks very much for everyone for being here, and have a great evening. Thank you.